Hello. Again, thank you to everyone for joining us for today's webinar, Menu Ideas to Boost After-School Meals Participation. Before we jump into the content, I just want to go through some brief housekeeping. You are in listen-only mode, which means that we cannot hear anything going on in the background, fortunately. But that does mean that if you have any questions, you should submit them via the questions section of the GoToWebinar menu. We will address questions at the end of the webinar. And we also welcome you to submit ideas or any input on our topic today as well. So if you do that in writing, we will be reading that off. In addition, we have several poll questions in today's webinar, so they'll pop up throughout the webinar and we'll direct you to respond, so just be ready for that. And as always, the recording and resources will be available after today's webinar. You'll get an email by the end of the week with a link to the recording and resources. So with that, I'll just introduce myself finally. My name is Carolyn Waite, and I am a Senior Program Manager for the Center for Best Practices with the No Kid Hungry campaign. And I just want to thank our sponsor, Tyson, for their generous support of all our after-school meals related work. Our agenda for today is just providing a quick background on No Kid Hungry's work on after school. Then I will introduce our panelists, and they'll provide a brief overview of their after-school programs and their work. Then we'll do a moderated Q&A, so I will ask them some questions. And then it will be opened up to you. And so again, please feel free to submit those questions via the question section of the menu, and we'll get to those at the end. And then we'll quickly go through some resources that we have and some other organizations have to support your work in this area. So with that, just some background on No Kid Hungry in case you're not familiar with us. No Kid Hungry is ending childhood hunger through effective programs that provide kids with the food they need. And we are actually a campaign of Share Our Strength, which is a nonprofit organization working to end hunger and poverty in the US and abroad. The team that I work on, the Center for Best Practices, specifically focuses on providing information, tools, and resources to help you end childhood hunger. So we've done some work in the area of after-school meals. This includes piloting a model that we call the umbrella model for trying to open up after-school meals to as many students as possible, whether they're participating in a specific activity or not. Also supper in the classroom to serve meals right in the classroom when the day ends. And related to kind of those two main models, we've also looked at a lot of best practices related to timing and logistics, coordinating with transportation, promoting the availability of meals and programming, working on packaging and branding of the meals, and partnerships. So today we're going to home in a little bit on that packaging and branding topic, just talking about what kind of menu and meal ideas work to really boost participation in this important program. But you may be thinking, like, why are we really focusing on menus? But it is a very timely topic because, as I'm sure you all know, that the new CACFP meal patterns have been in effect, and the transition year has now ended. So we thought it was just a good time to check in on how people are feeling about the new meal pattern requirements and share ideas of what people have done that's worked and where people are still struggling. In addition to just meeting these basic meal pattern requirements, you obviously still have to excite kids about the meals. We know you play a very important role in introducing new healthy foods to kids, but if they don't come to your site or your program, they don't try it in the first place, it's not going to help. And then lastly, all of this has to align with the capacity of the sponsor and the site. So you could dream up wonderful menus of, hot meals with local foods, but if you don't have a full kitchen, that may not be working for you. So how can you balance all of these things, from the requirements to what kids are going to be excited about eating to what you're able to manage as a sponsor and a site? I will not claim to be an expert in this area, and I think our panelists would also agree that they're still learning as they go and always working to do better. And so we really welcome your input and ideas today. So if you have great resources that you know of and that you've looked to, Please share those with us. If you have, menu items and food items that have worked great for you, we would also love to hear about that. So in addition to asking questions, again, we really invite you to share your ideas, and so we really hope that this can foster a great dialogue today. So with that, I'm finally going to get to know you a little bit better now that I've talked about myself, and we have our first poll question, so we'll get that pulled up for you. And so again, because the new meal patterns have been in effect, we want to know, how do you feel about where your organization is in implementing the new meal pattern? Great, pretty good, but we still have a few challenges, not good, or not applicable if your organization doesn't directly provide meals. So we'll give you just a moment or two to respond to that. All right, looks like we have pretty good participation. So, all right, if we are going to go ahead and close the poll so that we can see the answers here. And it looks like the most common answer is pretty good, but we still have a few challenges. A lot of people feel great, so that's awesome. We really want to hear what's working so great for you. And a lot of you, it sounds like you're on the line today getting ideas on behalf of other organizations that you may support. So that's great. So hopefully for those of you who still have a few challenges, we can work on getting some answers and ideas for you. And it sounds like we have a lot of people who have some ideas that they may share. All right, so moving on, I'd like to introduce our panelists. So I'll introduce all of them right now, and then they'll speak. So first we have Shannon Amos, who is the Senior Director of Agency Programs for the Children's Hunger Alliance in Ohio. Then we'll have together Sarah Eugene, the Program Development and Compliance Coordinator with Minneapolis Public Schools Culinary and Wellness Services, and along with her, Ann Ferreira, Menu Planner for Minneapolis Public Schools Culinary and Wellness Services. So with that, Shannon, I will turn it over to you. Welcome, Shannon.
Thank you, Carolyn, for the introduction. I'm happy to be here today to talk about our sponsorship, our agency, and our after-school meal menus. So next slide. So I'll talk a little bit about Children's Hunger Alliance and how we address hunger, and dive a little bit deeper into our after-school at-risk program and sponsorship, and then talk about a few of our pilot projects that we have done around shelf-stable food that have really helped us expand food access and ensure food access at the same time. So we are a statewide organization. We serve all of Ohio, and we primarily work to expand USDA child nutrition programs, which I'll talk about, but we also provide educational opportunities as well. We are one of the largest CACFP sponsors in the state. We sponsor homes, child care centers, and after school at risk. Unfortunately, Ohio ranks 18th in the nation for food insecurity. We were 13th, I think, last year, so we are moving in the right direction, but we certainly have some room for improvement. So these are kind of three main ways that we address childhood hunger. We are not a direct service food provider. We are not an emergency food provider. We almost work primarily exclusively through the USDA child nutrition programs. So our CACFP sponsorship is a large part of our work. We have about 275 different after-school at-risk programs or sites throughout the state. We have 800 family child care providers, and we sponsor about 25 daycare centers. Our daycare centers are a fairly new addition to our sponsorship within the last several years, and so we're still learning and growing to meet the demand that our state has for sponsorship within the center arena. And fiscal year 18 numbers are still being closed out for the agency, so I still have 17 numbers in here, but about 7 million meals and snacks we provide through CACFP sponsorship each year. A second big bucket of our work it relates to increasing access through school breakfast and summer meals. With the school breakfast program, we work as a consultant with the schools, and we have staff that are scattered throughout the state that meet with the schools. We're focusing on those that have a high percentage of kids who are free and reduced price eligible, and are actually working on legislation around this as well. But we provide best practices, we identify barriers, and we go in and really support the schools in wherever they are. If they are just trying, if they've rolled out something and they need help increasing participation, or they're stuck, or if they don't have a breakfast program at all, we are there to provide the expertise and resources and technical assistance to help them get there. In many ways, the summer meal programs are the same. We are not a direct summer feeding sponsor, but we do advocate for increased participation through best practices, such as adding programming around food service, and also encouraging organizations to become summer food service sponsors, especially in the rural parts of the state that are really lacking sponsors in many of the areas in Ohio. And then thirdly, our educational components. We provide a curriculum called CATCH, Coordinated Approach to Child Health, that is targeted to school agers in after-school and summer programs, that has both nutrition and physical activity components, as well as the Eat, Play, Grow program that is a preschool program targeted for nutrition education and physical activity as well. And we provide those through our own after-school programs and daycare centers that we sponsor, as well as others, as long as we have the staff to meet the demand. We also run a program through Ohio Department of Health called Ohio Healthy Programs that's teaching child care providers ways to improve healthy environments within their daycare home. So this could include things like equipment for gross motor play, for gross motor development in kids, or to improving menus and making changes within the menus and the food that they serve above and beyond meal pattern requirements. Next slide. So a little bit more about our After School at Risk sponsorship. We have been a sponsor for more than 20 years, which has not been at risk that entire time because At Risk was established in 2010. So prior to the establishment of At Risk, we were not a school-time sponsor, which means we collected income eligibility forms, and we are very small. We are limited to about 60 programs here in Columbus, mainly because with the nature of after school, a lot of it being a drop-in program, or some of them, at least some sites being drop-ins, it was very difficult to collect those income eligibilities and to provide reimbursement that was sustainable for us to grow. So with the establishment of At Risk in 2010, we were able to expand significantly to where we are today, to about 275-ish after-school sites. That tends to change as we add programs throughout the year. And we do primarily offer at-risk sponsorship in urban areas. There tends to be a concentration of after-school sites throughout the state in those urban areas, although we are starting to expand into more rural areas, and I'll talk about that soon. And we sponsor all unaffiliated sites. We don't own or operate any of these programs, but we do have significant partnerships with recreation centers, libraries, schools, churches, WISE, community-based organizations, you name it, we probably partner with them. And so I think we are unique in that not only are we unaffiliated, and there's really not a restriction on who can participate with us, but then we also are statewide. So up in Northwest, we are in Toledo. In the Northeast, we are in Cleveland, Akron, Canton, and Youngstown areas. In the Southwest, Cincinnati, Dayton, and Springfield. Here in Central Ohio, we're in Columbus. And then the three blue stars that are concentrated towards the southeast part of the state are actually our new programs that just started with us last year and this year, moving into rural areas. And the yellow stars are where we plan to expand into rural areas yet this year. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that got started in an upcoming slide. And last year, we're about 940,000 meals and snacks within fiscal year 18 that we provided. Next slide. So all of this takes a significant amount of coordination, as we do not actually prepare, package, or deliver any of this food ourselves. We rely on relationships and contracts with food vendors throughout the state through both public bid process for those that are in contracts of over $150,000 a year, or through small purchase agreements under $150,000. So we currently have 7 vendor contracts with 6 different vendors that service all of them, and we will probably add to that as we add new locations in the southern part of the state. All of our meals are unitized and delivered hot and cold and almost all of them are delivered daily. And a few parts of our state that are more rural or that only have a few sites, there are every other day deliveries where maybe Monday and Wednesday a hot food meal is delivered, and Tuesdays, Thursdays a cold meal is delivered, and then the shelf-stable meal is offered on Friday, for example. But the vast majority we do deliver daily. We offer a predominantly hot menu, meaning say 4 or more days of the week are hot, and maybe there's a cold meal mixed in here or there, an all cold menu and a snack menu. And we also offer a exclusively shelf-stable menu for our rural, some of our rural areas, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But we do use shelf-stable also for a backup as on-site should we have some issues, which I'll talk about also in a minute, with our regular delivery process. Our menus do exceed USDA requirements, even with new meal patterns. We've had these standards in place for quite a number of years. And so although we did have to make some adjustments for new meal patterns, I feel like we were able to fairly easily adjust to some of the new requirements. So for example, we always required a fruit and a vegetable had to be served, and with the new meal pattern standards, now that's a requirement. So some of those were a little easier for us to adjust to than others. But even above and beyond new meal pattern standards, we require our vendors to provide more fresh produce. We limit breaded and processed protein items. The whole processed protein can be a little confusing for some. It kind of depends on your interpretation, but we consider this things like sausage or hot dogs, things like that are highly processed, chicken nuggets as a breaded option, as opposed to, say, ground turkey or ground beef or a chicken breast or something like that. And we also promote variety on our menus. So we do have 4-week cycle menus, and we do build in and watch for, as our vendors submit menus to us monthly, we try to make sure that we're rotating those. Not all of our sites serve 5 days a week. So if you're only serving 2 days a week, we don't want you to have the same, 2 to 3 meals throughout the year. So we're conscientious about rotating our menu offerings, and also with things like serving an apple and an apple juice back to back. We try to catch those and make it as a good variety that kids are really going to enjoy. Next slide. So our shelf-stable pilot projects that I've been referring to are kind of twofold, and we've been working on these over the last couple of years. Because we rely on vendors to deliver our meals on a daily basis, you can imagine that there are some delivery issues. But then also things like attendance fluctuations. We serve so many rec centers and libraries that are drop-in programs that can really vary widely in terms of attendance. And it was costing us a lot of money to provide kind of the highest order that in case those kids came and we were unable to be reimbursed, for those fluctuations. And so we now use ADP to order for a daily food order, a standing food order, and then those sites have shelf-stable meals or snacks. The picture on here is just an example of one of those that we use in one part of our state. But we're able to have those on site, and so that if there's not extra food available, if there's a lot more kids in attendance, they can always have extras off the share table. Of course, we're not claiming that because it's already been served, but you can create meals off the share table or use the shelf stable as a backup to provide food access and ensure that all the kids that are there that day have access to food. And then, as I mentioned, with the food delivery, we have inclement weather days in Ohio for sure, especially up by the lake in Cleveland in the northeast part of the state specifically. And so a lot of our sites, it was too much of a logistical challenge to see if our vendors could even deliver it on some of those days, even if a site chose to remain open, or if weather hit earlier in the day and they decided they were going to open later in the day and they still wanted to serve food. It was very challenging. And so by having shelf stable on hand, they're always able to provide that food access if needed. And then providing over 270 deliveries on a daily basis really is, you're going to have some issues with delivery. You're going to have traffic. We're going to have trucks that break down or heating elements that go out that are going to cause issues. And through, no fault of anybody's, are just things that happen. And so in those instances too, we always struggled with how do we ensure that food access is being provided? And shelf stable was an answer to that in some regard. And then lastly, through program expansion, we, in some of the rural parts of the state, very difficult. These sites are far apart and they're not close to any food vendors. And so that made it extremely challenging for us to serve them, even though we knew that these sites were there and needed food. So one of the solutions that we had was to provide a full week shelf stable menu for those programs as a quicker way to provide food access while we worked on a more sustainable solution to get them into a claimable model. And so we provided shelf stable with some grant funds as a pilot. We moved that into a claimable model, and then have recently this year found a food vendor that is able to serve our rural parts of the state. We're providing that through not only a company that can do the food preparation and packaging for us, but then also a courier service who can actually get the food to those programs. So that has been a work in progress. But that is how we've used shelf stable, and I think through all of this, offering a variety of different types of meals and snacks, and being able to build those to meet the needs specifically of rural versus urban, or smaller sites versus larger sites, has really been instrumental for us to provide consistent access, and also to boost participation because the kids know that that food is going to be there, and that we're going to offer a variety of food, not just maybe the same things that they're getting at school day after day. So that is kind of a summary of our after-school sponsorship and how we use menus and a variety of different menus. So I put this information up here, and I'm sure that it'll be available after the presentation as well.
Yes, thank you so much, Shannon. That was great. And now we are going to turn it over to Ann and Sarah with Minneapolis Public Schools.
Hi, and thank you for having us. So my name is Sarah Eugene. I work with Program Development and Compliance for the district.
And my name is Ann Ferreira, and I do menu planning for the district.
Next slide. So we start a little bit of background on our department and our district. So we are a school food authority, so we're self-sponsored. Currently, we participate in school breakfast, school lunch, and after-school snack, as well as CACFP, so we're an at-risk, specifically an at-risk sponsor only. We also do FFEP, so we participate in really almost all the federal food programs that are offered. MPS serves about just over 36,000 students. About 59% of those students are eligible for free reduced price meals, and 68% do identify as students of color. So between all of the different meal programs, we serve roughly 56,000 meals and snacks each day. That's broken down 14,000 breakfast, 22,000 lunch, 11,500 of FFEP snacks, about 5,000 after school snacks, and 3,500 suppers. So MPS actually did not become an at-risk after school sponsor until 2014. So it still is relatively new for us. And as we continue to expand and just learn more about the program and what our limitations and our parameters are, we are really working with that program as well. So we have 115 sites, 70 school kitchen sites, 45 community after school sites, and 1 central kitchen. Each of our schools and MPS has, how can I put this, different kitchen capabilities, if you will. So some schools only have the capacity to heat and serve. Some schools have the capacity to do modified scratch cooking. Some schools have the capacity to do full scratch cooking. So we really have to use our menus strategically to meet both the meal pattern requirements as well as recognize what limitations our school kitchens have. For our community after school sites, so those are going to be our at-risk as well as SFSP during the summer. For those sites, we do currently do cold meals only. And everything for those sites are prepared in our central kitchen, and it's shipped out on a daily basis. So similar to Shannon, we can certainly empathize with the delivery struggles. We do deliver everything 1 day in advance for those sites because we have historically ran into situations with traffic, with with weather. Yeah, you know, being in Minnesota, it snows 9 months out of the year. And so as a result, we are more specifically for summer food, when we're required to have a specific meal service time, but we were running into situations where we couldn't get the food there in time for the sites to serve. And so to mitigate that, we have started delivering those sites all a day in advance. Next slide. So we do have some different after-school menu options. We do offer hot meals within our schools, cold meals within our schools and our community sites, as well as snack. And so Anna's going to talk a little bit about the breakdown between the different meal types and how we decide what is best for the sites and what they're going to serve.
Hi, everybody. So, yeah, so we have really streamlined our menus based on the capability of the site that we're serving, whether it's a school or a community park or library or whatever. So for our hot meals, or I guess I'd like to say our school sites get an option of a hot or a cold meal, and the cold would be a super snack meal. I have 2 different types of hot meal menus for dinner, depending upon the capability of the kitchen that they have at the school. And then the cold meals that we have that are available to the parks and the community sites are a super snack or a picnic meal. So for our I'll start probably talking a little bit about our schools that have modified scratch cooking. I've set up like a 3-week rotation of about their favorite lunch meals, and put them into a 3-week rotation. So they're pretty popular because, you know, I don't put the lowest participation menu item on there. So I have some flexibility there. For our sites that get their meals from the central kitchen, our prepackaged sites, that menu shadows the lunch cycle. So I menu 1 week off of the lunch cycle, so that when they're producing the meals at the nutrition center for lunch, they're also on that same day producing you know, the extra meals that will be used for dinner the next week, and then those prepackaged meals are frozen. So that menu gets set up a little bit differently, so it's not quite so much a favorites thing, you know, it's just basically the lunch menu all over again, and we found that was the best way to get that production done. The super snack and picnic menus, those are also very similar in their components, just so that, you know, we're not trying to do completely different packaged meal setups for them. So the super snack rotation is just a 2-week rotation. Super snack menus are pretty challenging for us. So I was happy when we could come up with a 2-week cycle. Our picnic menu is also just a 2-week cycle. And the picnic menu is basically just a variety of sandwiches and salads throughout the week. So that's, you know, not quite so snacky, just a little bit more of a cold meal. Let's see here.
We really developed the super snack menu because we'd heard from a lot of our sites that the regular snack, the 2-component snack, wasn't enough, but they didn't want the full dinner item. It just wasn't as well received by the students or the youth, in their after-school programs. And so we kind of looked at how can we combine the two? You know, how can we offer more food but still make it snacky, if you will? And then, of course, the benefit to us as a sponsor is the increased reimbursement rate. So you're looking at it, I believe it's 91 cents for a snack, or upwards of $3.50, including the cash in lieu, for a dinner, which is our super snack does follow the dinner meal pattern requirements. And so really it's a win-win in which kids get additional food, as well as a sponsor, we get additional reimbursement.
For our cooking schools and also our pre-pack schools that typically have a salad bar during lunch service. We also have them utilize that salad bar at dinner so that we're able to use up leftovers from the salad bar at lunch and very easily meet the fruit and vegetable requirement for the meal. So that's a kind of...
Yeah, there's some examples of our on-site dinner.
Yeah.
So you can see the entrees are rotating, but then the salad bar is offered as well. We try to always offer at least one green salad and then one fresh veg at the salad bar, as well as one fresh or canned fruit.
Yeah, not the full-blown salad bar.
The reason that this menu is only Monday through Thursday is because our school programs, so the specific programs that operate within our schools that get the hot meals, they are only Monday through Thursday, so we don't have programming on Friday. As you saw on the Super Snack menu and on some of our other menus, they are Monday through Friday because our community sites do serve all of those days.
I don't know what's on the next slide.
I think that is about it for us, Shannon, right?
Yes, I believe so. So thank you for that background on your program and the overview of your menus. So with that, we actually have another poll question. So now that Shannon and Sarah and Ann have talked a little bit about the kinds of meals that they offer, we want to ask you what kinds of meals you typically offer. So again, we'll get that poll up there for you, and your options are hot or hot entree, all cold meals, or shelf-stable meals, or a mix of all of the above. So again, we know that there are probably some exceptions to everything, but just the kind you offer most of the time. So we'll give you a few seconds to select your response. Just a few seconds more. Try to select your response as quickly as possible here. All right, I think we're gonna call it. And let's see, a lot of you are doing a big mix, and 30% said hot or hot meals, with just 12% at all cold and 2% at shelf stable. So a lot of mix and variety, just as our panelists also discussed. Well, great. So I am excited to now be able to ask my questions to our panelists. So my first, and this is obviously a big one, what are the favorite menu items that you serve, whether in hot meals, cold meals, or shelf-stable meals and snacks? So Shannon, do you want to start off and talk about a few favorite items?
Yeah, sure. So we have multiple menus, and a lot are similar to the menus that were just shown in Minnesota. But we have a chicken fried rice that's a pretty popular menu item. It's fried rice and diced chicken, and then the sides are peas and carrots, so it kind of can all be blended together kind of into a larger bowl, even though they're separate components. Some of our pasta dishes are popular items, even something as simple as, you know, a baked pasta with mozzarella on top. Tacos and any kind of Mexican dishes are always popular on our menus, so we do incorporate a couple of different versions. There's a cilantro chicken burrito that's offered on one. Beef sauce tacos are offered on several of ours. And then we have one of our vendors does a little bit more in terms of home style cooking, and so something like a Swedish meatballs or you know, a homemade this beef chili neck kind of mixture with whole grain noodles and chili on top. That's kind of a Cincinnati thing, but it's a dish that is popular in that region of the state, and so it goes over well on that menu. So there is a little bit of consideration to that at times. Some of our menus, I didn't say this in the regular presentation, but some of our menus are pork-free. I think actually similar to Minnesota, we have a large Somali population, especially in Columbus. I think it's maybe the second largest Somali population, which is a pork-free menu offerings, and so we do that as well as avoid nuts because it just is a lot easier with the number of meals that we serve, just to avoid that altogether. It really kind of streamlines not having to do a lot of menu changes and requests.
Great, thank you, Shannon. Sarah and Ann, do you want to share some of your favorite menu items?
Sure. I think we worked really hard on our super snack menu, and I think that the kids are responding well to it. In-house here at the Nutrition Center, we make a couple of different bean dips. We make a homemade pinto dip that we portion into individual IW containers, and also a hummus. Those have been really popular this year. We serve the hummus with goldfish pretzels and carrots for dipping. And the pinto dip we serve with tortilla chips, so those have been really popular. Last year we started a pizza picnic pack where we have kind of like a pizza Lunchable, where we use our house-made marinara sauce, a couple of flatbreads, and mozzarella cheese, and you know, gives the look of a Lunchable, and the kids have really, you know, taken to that as well.
Yeah, we found that, I don't know how interactive meals can be or how interactive we can actually make them, but if we found a way to include the kids, so whether that's through dipping with what Ann just talked about with the hummus and the pinto dip, or with actually building their own pizzas. We also have a chicken walking taco that the kids have to sort of put together themselves. That has really seemed to help participation and also just the general acceptance of the food as well. And similar to what Shannon said, our after school menus are all pork free and peanut and tree nut free as well, for much of the same reasons.
Yeah, and some of our hot meals that are a little more popular, Minnesota, you know, we have a tater tot hot dish that, you know, the kids always love that. We also serve a brunch for, well, dinner in this case, but we do serve it brunch for lunch as well. So an omelet with pancakes and breakfast potatoes, and garlic cheese bread, which we make in-house with house-made marinara, is also right up there. And then the chicken patty sandwiches and burgers, as you can imagine, are always popular, and pizza.
Yeah, I can't go wrong with pizza.
Well, it is a good thing I had a snack before this webinar, because otherwise I would be very hungry right now. Well, I have another quick poll question for everyone. Since it was also part of what our speaker shared, we wanted to ask you, how long is your usual menu cycle? So we'll get that pulled up for you. And so we have a 1-week cycle menu, a 2-week cycle menu, 3 or more weeks, something else, or again, not applicable if your organization doesn't provide meals. So we'll give you another minute to submit that. Okay, it looks like we have pretty high response rate right now. And oh, it looks like 42% say 3 or more weeks, 26 or 27%, it keeps bouncing around since we haven't closed it yet, say 2 weeks. And just 8% say 1 week. So that's great, a lot of variety in there. So I guess piggybacking on that question, and then also what our panelists just shared, if you have any favorite items that you have incorporated in those cycle menus, please go ahead and you can add those into the question box or the chat box, and we can share those with others at the end or after the webinar. Great. So my next question for all of the panelists are just your general tips for menu planning, especially kind of what you mentioned a little bit already, Anne, in terms of coordinating with lunch menus. And so just that, yeah, that general approach to making sure that you have that variety, that you're not repeating things, et cetera. Anne and Sarah, do you want to start off with that one?
Yeah, sure. You know, it is really a big thing for me to work with the lunch menus at the same time as I'm planning the dinner menus, so that I'm not, you know, having, you know, the same thing for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you know, sometimes to try to avoid that repeat. I also try to go with the flow of the production facility, so that I'm menuing things that are already being produced. There, things that can be produced 1 week, easily frozen, and then used the next week is another thing. I always really try to keep in mind the after-school meal staff, you know, just kind of keeping those meals a little bit simpler for that staff, because there's not as much staff there to help them, you know, so I'm not doing things like, you know, fresh oven fried chicken or things like that. I try to keep it really, really simple for them. So yeah, those are kind of the main things that I keep in mind when I'm planning.
Great. Now, Shannon, I know you're not personally planning out all of your menus, but if you have any other just kind of general tips or guidelines that you keep in mind or incorporate into your contracts with your vendors, would love to hear those.
Yeah, because we do work with so many different vendors, we have at times been able to kind of borrow good ideas and share them with others if things are popular. It is interesting that in different parts of the state, things go over better, you know, some than others, so it doesn't always work for us. But our after-school sites submit online to us through our software system their daily meal counts, and so we have a comment section in there that we encourage them to provide feedback for us. So we review those comments daily. So we're pulling if we have a lot of feedback on, you know, things that aren't working or really great comments on some things, you know, we will try to adjust, you know, the future month's menu and make recommendations based on that. There have been a few things just, it wasn't the food itself, but it was the quality of once it was packaged and held and, you know, by the time it got on the plate that the quality just didn't look as good. And we've switched some things out for that. So sometimes it's not even the food itself. For example, we really struggle with pizza on our menus because of the holding time and being able to do that. We struggle sometimes with some of the easily bruised fruits such as bananas and pears. Either they'll get to the vendor and the bananas will be grass green and they can't use them, or you know, the pears get damaged during delivery. So we've made some adjustments and accommodations, not only just with taste preferences, but also with you know, quality and presentation as well.
That's a great point. I once heard a joke that you have to wake up in the middle of the night to hit your pear at the perfect point of ripeness before it starts bruising. So I'm sure that is a problem with fresh pears. Great. So we have another poll question kind of building on this approach to menu planning, which is how do you utilize leftover meals or food? So we have that you serve supper leftovers at other meal times or vice versa. So more specifically for programs that do lunch and supper, for example. Also that you serve supper leftovers as an option at supper the next day. 3, that you avoid leftovers and rely on backup meals if you have higher than usual participation. 4, that you don't use leftovers at all. Or 5, something else. So that's a little bit more of a complicated question with complicated responses, so we'll give you a few minutes to select your response for that. All right, so it looks like not using leftovers is the most popular option here, but 21% say that they do serve leftovers as an option at supper the next day, and then 9% say that they use supper leftovers at other meal times, and 8% that they avoid them and rely on backup meal options like those shelf staple meals. So great, thank you for sharing on that one. And my next question for our panelists is whether you do any item or menu taste testing or taste tests with your participants. So Shannon, I know you already talked about getting that feedback from your site, so maybe we'll let Sarah and Ann talk about this one.
For our after-school meals program, we actually don't do any taste testing with the kids. We're just really, you know, using what we have on the lunch menu for the hot meals, and then I rely on feedback to change menus after they've run for a little while or make adjustments. Just really based on that, I kind of found that was just, I got a lot better, more useful information that way. You know, and sometimes it had to do with with what the students did or did not like, and sometimes it had to do with, you know, what the staff did or did not like, you know, say things like sunflower seeds that are, you know, spill a lot and are hard to clean up. You know, we got so many complaints about that we, you know, we use that feedback, which we wouldn't have gotten that feedback, you know, at a taste test. So yeah, we kind of do the put it out there and menu it for a while as the actual test.
We recently switched over to an electronic tracking system for our community sites, and they're able to enter comments about the menu, and so that's been really helpful. It's been kind of more real-time feedback, and also we can look at it more holistically as a sponsor, looking at several different sites instead of just hearing one site react like negatively, for example, for something, and then, you know, everybody freaking out saying we have to take this on the menu. But often if we take a deep breath and look at it over our 45 sites or our 115 sites, you'll have one site that hates it, right, and say never serve it again, and then you'll have another site that says we love this, can we have it twice a week? And so we really try to look at the trends more than just an individual feedback from one menu day.
That's great, thanks. Shannon, did you have anything else that you wanted to add on this one?
Nope.
All right, great. So let's get into what's probably going to be my last question for you, because we see a lot of questions rolling in already, but I want to make sure we ask this, which is, what are your biggest challenges or needs when it comes to menus and meals? So, you know, the component groups that you find really challenging, or just aspects of the new requirements, et cetera. And Shannon, why don't you start off on this one?
Sure. One recent challenge that comes to mind with our shelf-stable menus and being able to provide not just, you know, for the backup purposes, providing one or two different meal types is not that big of a deal because they're not used all that often. But for those that required us to use a cycle menu for shelf-stable, the variety of options there is pretty limiting, and so that is very challenging for us. It became even more so when we moved to new meal patterns where both the fruit and the vegetable component were required. There's just very limited vegetable options. We have some vegetable juice blends and some marinara sauce and salsa and a couple things like that, but it's pretty difficult to provide the variety. So thankfully we're not providing that on a large scale, but we have run into challenges with that we've needed to try and accommodate, or that we just have not really been able to accommodate very well to this point. So that has been a big challenge for us. I think the other thing too is, I guess this kind of goes back to a point before, you know, sometimes just the fact of the transportation of the food is really a challenge for us, sometimes more than the food is itself. And so having things, you know, that in a hot menu especially, that will keep hot and keep the quality and on a hot holding temperature, or, you know, we want to try to provide more fresh produce, but the fact that some of those things are very difficult for us to do, such as the pears or bananas, or even oranges at times. We had to pull oranges from our menu because of the orange crop pricing last year for a period of time. And so that can be challenging and frustrating for us, wanting to provide the variety, but having, you know, kind of circumstances outside of our control that prevent us from doing so, at least maybe in some parts of the state, depending on, you know, our menus and the circumstances there.
Great, thanks. Ann and Sarah, what are your biggest challenges?
I guess we could agree very much with the vegetable component. We do also use juice quite often, and salsa, marinara to meet that requirement, especially in the, you know, if we need a shelf stable snack for sure. But it just, we also kind of do it to avoid waste. I just feel that, you know, in our program throughout the day, throughout lunch and breakfast, that we offer a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables, and I feel like offering the vegetable in a juice form at this time of the day is really, you know, a little bit more beneficial than throwing in another, you know, prepackaged vegetable at them. So the vegetables have been pretty hard. We still, you know, put a few in there, but I also struggle with the two meat alternate component for the super snack program. So one of the ways that we try to fix that is a lot of cheese sticks, but I would be really open to, you know, other ideas or other products people are using as well.
Yeah, we found that if it's not a meat, the meat alternate typically is very dairy heavy, and that can cause a problem, not only just with allergies, but a lot of our student population just doesn't do well with lactose, so is lactose intolerant. And so with the 2-ounce meat alternate requirement, typically that means we're offering 2 different types of dairy products. So whether it's like a yogurt and a cheese stick or something like that, it can get pretty dairy heavy, which can get challenging from an acceptability standpoint of the menu.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, I do want to get to this last poll question because I know our panelists were also interested in all of your responses to know which is the meal component that you find most challenging in after-school meals, whether in terms of just ideas for any of it or having a good variety. So we have the grain, the meat alternate, vegetable, fruit, or all of them. I did not include milk. Those ideas and variety for the milk component is pretty straightforward. There can certainly be its own challenges there in terms of whether it's shelf stable or pricing and things like that. But just give you another minute, and then I promise we will get to the questions that we've had coming in. All right, and it's a pretty close tie between meat alternate and vegetable. Looks like meat alternate starting to break away. 19–20% say grain, 7% say all of them. Fruit, not challenging for anyone apparently. So, all right, well, thank you. I think that's really great to know. Certainly it's always great to band together and, be able to let vendors know where there are problems and where there are some opportunities to meet a need. So thank you for that. So with that, we're going to turn over to audience Q&A. We've gotten several questions. And Anne and Sarah, we did get a few questions regarding your super snack. And so we just want you to confirm that there's a fruit and a vegetable instead of 2 fruits, that you have like the veggie blend.
Correct. The juice is always crediting as the vegetable. So there are days where it's 2 vegetables, but there is never 2 fruits because our juice is the vegetable component.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that. We have another question for you before you mute yourself again. Do you use offer versus serve with your salad bar?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yep. So if there's not a hot veg on the dinner menu, then the veg is offered on the salad bar as well as the fruit. But for all of our hot meals, because they're self-prepped at the school, we do use OVS for all of those. We've actually recently tried to implement OVS with our community site meals as well. So one of the benefits of producing our own food is that we do have that flexibility to maybe try it out. And so we're trying it with the exclusion of milk, which is where we get a lot of our negative feedback. But we're trying to find a good balance between the sites having enough milk on hand in case somebody wants it, and then not having any milk at all if we don't send it with the meals.
Okay, so piggybacking on this one is, what are you doing to reduce food waste and or packaging waste? NPS, I'll let you start off with that, and then we'll let Shannon answer that question as well.
So for the food waste, with particularly with the super snacks, we have before sent the juice and the milk separately so that they can choose that, so they can decline it. Whereas with something like a picnic meal, it's included in there. So that's helped a little bit. Packaging, I don't know, we have mixed feelings about packaging.
So our picnic dinners are packaged in compostable trays. And luckily, we have a really great partnership with the Minneapolis Park and Rec Department, and they have a robust compost program. And so working with them, they are probably 30 of our 45 at-risk after-school community sites. And so working together, we've kind of tried to tackle that. From that end, our super snack containers are made from recycled bottles, but they are not compostable. They are recyclable. And we have gotten some pushback on that. So we're actively searching for an alternative. Our struggle comes from making the meal or the snack look presentable while also keeping cost in mind, of course, as well as reduced waste. Regarding the food waste too, I'll just piggyback on that and say that OVS helps, infinitely at the school level where we are able to utilize it. One of our struggles with non-school sites in utilizing OVS is we tried to tackle it with one summer program, but it's really hard for folks who aren't invested in maybe I shouldn't say invested, but aren't involved in food service in their day-to-day life to recognize which components are which sometimes. So I'll use an egg as an example. For some reason, lots of folks think that that's dairy. And so when we have non-food service folks trying to run OVS, that becomes a challenge as well. So we recognize that OVS is great for reducing waste, but we haven't quite figured out how to tackle that from a community site perspective yet.
Thank you. Shannon, do you want to offer any ideas for reducing food waste or packaging waste?
Yeah, so as I mentioned with how we do our food orders, the site sets their food order, but we are looking at their ADPs and adjusting their food orders on a daily basis for matching as close to ADP as possible and trying to send, really exactly what they need. We know it's not always perfect, but it does help us to have that shelf stable on hand. Even if there are a couple extra kids in attendance, we do encourage them to utilize, if they can create a full meal or snack off of their share table. Again, not claiming it, not trying to get anybody in trouble for that. Don't claim that because you've already served it, but you can, compile a full meal or snack sometimes, especially in some of our larger sites. So we encourage them to do that first. And a lot of our sites have very creative ways of, selecting drawing names out of a hat for who, is the first to pick off of the share table. So a lot of our sites, even though they're recording an unclaimed meal for us, none of that food is going to waste. So that's beneficial for us. I think reviewing the feedback on a daily basis, and if there are menu items that sites are saying, the kids won't eat, trying to readjust those menus to reduce that, as well as our monitors that are out in the field. If they're seeing a consistent meal or meal component that's just not being eaten, we will adjust that as well a lot of times. So that's in terms of leftovers, some of the things that we're doing. And then as far as reducing the containers and things, it's extremely difficult. All of our vendors use different items, and the unitization just breeds more packaging, unfortunately. And so we do not have a great solution, and we've not explored that pointedly with all of our different vendor relationships. I know some of our sites do take it upon themselves for some of the containers that are kind of the plastic tray type containers. They will wash and reuse those themselves for arts and crafts projects and other things. We've seen some very creative things come out of that, but not anything that's on a consistent basis for us yet.
Great, thank you for sharing those ideas. We are almost out of time, and so we will do our best to respond to all of these questions as part of the follow-up to this webinar. So we really appreciate you asking so many great questions. And so again, we will answer those as follow-up. And so I just very briefly want to mention that we have a lot of resources on our website, bestpractices.nokithungry.org. I will not mention all of them right now, but when you get this, the PowerPoint slide and the recording afterward, you can click on all of these links and download all of them, go back to listen to prior webinars. And then I also just want to point out that, again, we're not the experts on this one, and there are a lot of other organizations doing great work in this area. So the Alliance for a Healthier Generation has their Smart Food Planner, which includes some supper and super snack and snack menus. They also have an Amazon store with compliant products that you can purchase. And then obviously USDA has some great resources, including a webinar series. You can go back and listen to past recordings. There are also more coming up. And then they have team nutrition training tools as well. So with that, right here on time at 4 o'clock Eastern, we'll wrap this up. I just want to say a huge thank you to our panelists for sharing their work and for answering all of these questions. We really appreciate your insights on this. And thanks to all of you for joining today. We have really appreciated your active engagement. And again, we will do our best to follow up with all of this afterwards. So thank you and have a wonderful afternoon.